Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Exploring Sacred. This is Denise King Francisco, and I'm hoping that you can rejoin me here in the chat room this morning. And we're going to try this again with the sound system. Not quite sure what is going on. Hey, Danny, it's good to have you in the chat room. I see what happened. I was in the middle of a Dell update, and everything kind of went a little bit awry. So here we are. Hey, Katie Battle. Here we are. So I was in the middle of a Dell update, unbeknownst to me, in the middle of Exploring Sacred, about unlearning and relearning, learning again, and talking about what it means to unlearn. Because sometimes, I'm telling you, unlearning things can be really tricky. When our balance is challenged by people who present a new idea, a new way of being, a new way of presenting ourselves in the world, new options, new opportunities, that can really be off-putting at first. And then it can be absolutely liberating. So that's the topic of today. And so we've got Katie in the chat. We've got Danielle in the chat. Sally, I hope you're out there again. Marianne, I hope you're out there again. And Sonia, come on in and let's talk about what it is that you had to unlearn and what it was like for you to relearn. And maybe you just decided to toss it away. You unlearned something and decided that it just needed to be in the trash bin. It didn't need to belong in your psyche and in your mind any longer. Let's talk about that. I know that one of the things that I remember having an epiphany when I was about 17 years old. I was sitting in church here in Michigan, Catholic church, of course, for me, and 2 rows in front of me, we were at a wedding, and it was at the church that I had gone to for a very long time, and sitting 2 pews in front of me was a very dear family, a group of friends, family friends. And they were sitting in front of us, and they were very Lutheran. And they went to the Lutheran church for generations in their family, the same Lutheran church that they had been going to for a great big long time in the history of their family. And they were sitting a couple of rows in front of me, and I had this epiphany in my 17-year-old mind. And the epiphany went something like this. You know, I went to catechism forever. This is what I was thinking. And I learned all of these things about being Catholic and that there are certain Christian traditions that get you a quick pass into heaven. And, you know, what I learned was that perhaps Catholicism was one of those. And that maybe because nobody else had that really great quick pass into other places, maybe there were other religions that frankly didn't get to, get their ticket into heaven. And it dawned on me as I was sitting there in this church thinking about all the things that I had been taught about who gets to go to heaven, who doesn't get to go to heaven. And it dawned on me that is just all a bunch of baloney. I didn't say that out loud. I was thinking it in my mind as the priest was going about his business. And I looked around the church at a myriad of people from all different religions, all different pathways, and I thought to myself, I think what's more important is that we're really good people, that we try to live a good life and that we try to be kind to others. And I think that that's probably the way that we get our ticket into heaven. And I just sat there with that thought of mine, thinking about all of the other things perhaps that I had been taught in all of those years of catechism, that just maybe there might be another way of thinking about them. And later on in that day, I had the discussion with my dad, the sergeant. I said, Dad, I was sitting there in that pew and I thought to myself, what makes anybody more deserving of going to heaven? Because of the church that they park themselves in every Saturday or Sunday? Or is it because they're a good person, Dad? And he looked at me and he said, I think it's more important, Denise Lynn, to be a really good person. I think that matters more than what pew you park yourself in on a Saturday evening or a Sunday. I think it's just about being a good human being. And that was one of those moments of unlearning that to this day I can still think about. I can still place myself in that pew, in that church, thinking to myself, wait a minute, I think I've been indoctrinated to a single thought. And now that I'm 17, I have my own car, right? I kind of get my own life. There might be another way of thinking about all of this. Well, I was fortunate to grow up in a family and with a dad who always said, if you have questions, ask the question. Wait for the answer. Be open to other ways of thinking. Don't be ignorant. But in my own mind, I had kept that thought that I needed to be there on holy days and get my Ash Wednesday ashes and do all those things because I was going to have a guaranteed ticket, right, on that stairway to heaven. That was one of my first forays into unlearning something and relearning and really beginning to study at that point. As much as you can study those things at the age of 17. But there, at that time, as the universe often provides, I started working at the newspaper. I started working at the Grand Rapids Press and meeting people from all over because we had reporters from all over the United States reporting on things and stories and making trips to places all over the world to report on them. That's back when old-fashioned journalism, right, was in vogue. Well, old-fashioned journalism is a wonderful thing, and frankly, my small editorial for the moment is that some good old-fashioned editorial content would be a good thing these days, and some good old-fashioned journalism would be a great good thing in this country again. But having said all of that, that was my first remembrance of unlearning. Sonia, what was that like for you? Danielle, what was it like for you? Katie, what was it like for you the first time that you realized you needed to unlearn something in order to learn? I remember then after that going to Mass on Sundays and thinking to myself, I wonder how many people sitting here in this church with me think that perhaps theirs is the only way, that this is the only way, that any of us is going to meet our Maker on the other side at the end of our days, right? Oh my goodness, that was a big thought for me. And I often believe that when we are challenged to unlearn something, and sometimes it can just be something that we were taught as a child in the home that we were raised in. We can be taught certain things about people. We can be taught things that perhaps are a little bit what do I want to say? I grew up in a home, and again, thank goodness, I grew up in a home where there wasn't racism. We didn't have that. We were in a military family, so the big deal was make sure that you ask questions, that you learn, don't be ignorant. And I know that I'm still ignorant about things, which is why I continue to travel and to learn, because I don't want to waste this life in any corridor of ignorance about anything. Yeah, Holly is saying it felt a little shaky for her, a little lonely to separate from the herd. Isn't that the truth? Separating from the herd. Even, years later when I divorced my husband, I remember the first time that I went to church and I knew that I was no longer allowed to take communion. And my daughter was 12 at the time, and Elise, many of you know her, she's kind of a little pill. She's her own woman. She came out that way. And she said to me, Mom, this is a bunch of BS. That I can go up for communion and you can't. I think we just need to be done with this whole thing. Until they change the rules, we just need to be done with this whole thing. Because you did what was best, or what you thought was best for all of us. You're being punished. That doesn't make sense to me, Mom. We need to find a new gig. And it was really, one of those pivotal points that new gigs opened up, new ideas, new ways of thinking of exploring. I remember recently having a conversation with one of my sisters. Maybe it was Del Marie, maybe it was Barbara. And we were talking about this concept of having 2 feet. And I think that a lot of you can understand this conversation. I was having a talk yesterday with a friend of mine about how scary it can sometimes be to acknowledge maybe that we can have 2 feet. And what do I mean by that? Well, having 2 feet for me means on the one hand, I am a Christian woman. I am that. I may not go to Mass every Sunday, but I do enjoy the teachings of Yeshua ben Joseph, the ascended teacher. And I believe what the teachings were meant to be: love one another, be good to one another, right? For me, it boils down to that. And at the same time, I carry a chanupa, which means that I walk the pipeway. And out in Lakota territory, they would say that I follow the teachings of Wawikia, the life bringer, Yeshua ben Joseph, and at the same time, I carry that chanupa. For some people, that's a difficulty. You do one or you do the other. And it must have been my sister Barbara, because we all know that Barbara is Episcopalian, and she's a sun dancer, and she's an elder, and she's a traditional Lakota woman. And there are people who feel that you have to be one or you have to be the other, that you can't have 2 feet. And sometimes people have 3 feet, right? But I'm just using this as an example. At first, it can be uncomfortable acknowledging having 2 feet. I've had people say to me, Denise, I was raised as a Christian and I love the teachings of Jesus, but I really like the teachings of Buddha. How can I reconcile liking or enjoying both? And for some people, that's a real complicated matter, enjoying both. Some people feel guilty the first time that they crack open the Dhammapada, right? Or they crack open for the very first time the Quran. Oh my goodness, like it's some secret society thing, that a bolt from heaven is going to come down and smote you. You grew up Catholic, what are you doing taking a look at that Quran? Well, and I mean it in all sincerity, it can really be, as Holly said, breaking away from the herd can be scary. Yeah. Katie is saying, I think it was when my cousin said that you have to go to church in order to get to heaven. Well, yeah, that can be scary. And Sonia's saying, still in the process of it. I'm fighting it. Yeah. It can be really tricky. And frankly, it can be scary. Sometimes it means that we lose friends. Sometimes it can mean that our family members kind of back up a minute and reassess us. And that can be uncomfortable when people are reassessing us. This morning, as I'm up here in the School of Sacred Studies, we have a crew in the house cleaning the air ducts in the house. We've got this great new grandson, Easton, and at this moment he has lung disease because he's a preemie. And we want to make sure that all of the vents and the air system in the home are as clean as we can possibly have them, because he has, for the time being, some issues with his lungs. So we want it to be clean. And having the carpets cleaned, again, so that he has a good place to be when he comes to see his cool grandma and grandpa. And I said to Todd this morning, as I always do, I often wonder when people walk into our home and they get into the crevices, my office or Todd's office, and they take a look at the artwork and the antiquity and the books. I wonder what they think. And I know for some people, it is such a challenge that it's actually off-putting to look at some of the artwork, the native artwork or the African artwork in our home, or the Celtic artwork. And I just kind of chuckled to myself, and I thought to myself this morning, how perfect for this topic, unlearning and relearning. I believe some people come in and they take a look at what's around the house, and it makes them pause for a moment. They look at Todd and I, and we look kind of normal, like a regular couple. And maybe they think, what is it about these things that this couple finds attractive or intriguing? Right? The other day, Debbie, who helps me clean the house once a month, she came in, and she had been on a respite for a while, so she hadn't been to our home for a good long time. And in the interim, the cleaning service had sent other ladies out to help me. And she said to me, Denise, I'm so happy to be back here. She said, there was one gal who came to your home and went downstairs and saw that buffalo head hanging and was so upset by your big community drum and the buffalo head on your lower level, she asked not to be reassigned to your home. It was just too much. It was absolutely too much, all of this Native American stuff in your house. I said, well, she just wasn't ready to unlearn whatever it was that she had learned about Native America, about Native American spirituality. And that's okay. Maybe in all of these months, something is going to pique her interest, and maybe she's going to relearn about the drum and about buffalo and about whatever else she may have encountered on the lower level regarding Native American spirituality. And that's okay. That's okay. Unlearning what our parents have taught us isn't always easy. And it's not, as I say, our parents teach us based on what they know, based on what they learned. So it's not parental bashing by any stretch. It's how can we expand upon maybe what our parents taught us, or our grandparents, or the foster care system. What did they teach us about ourselves? What did they teach us about being a woman? What did they teach us about what it means to be a man? What does it mean to be the eldest child? What did they teach us about people of other color, ethnicity? I was really surprised the first time that I really ran into racism. And it wasn't because I was raised in a racist family, but I was raised next to a racist family who didn't like white people. That was alarming to me because I grew up being taught that everybody is a human being and everybody deserves love and compassion. Period. I mean, I would get in trouble, frankly, if I were racist or said something derogatory about somebody's ethnicity. I would have been in trouble. And when you got in trouble with the Sarge, that was some big trouble. I'm just saying. But the family next to us from Mississippi hated crackers. That's what we were called, the crackers next door. And I remember one morning, every morning there on the Army base, of course, we woke up to reveille at the crack of dawn. So taps in the evening, reveille in the morning. And that was the routine. Well, one morning, reveille was reveille, and that means get up. And for me, that meant my dad was making coffee downstairs. Because reveille would go, the Sarge would go downstairs and start to make percolator coffee, which I love a good cup of percolator Joe, right? And he would always pour a little quarter cup of coffee for me. And we would sit downstairs together, he and I'd mix in a little cream and a little sugar. And all of a sudden, there was a calamity outside. All I knew was that my mother had gone out to start the car or to do something outdoors. And all of a sudden, there was a calamity. And my dad and I looked out the front door, and our neighbor from Mississippi was chasing my mother down the sidewalk with a knife, telling my mother that she was going to kill her. Because she was white. I'm going to kill you, you cracker. I'm going to kill you. Mrs. Gray. I wonder whatever happened to Mrs. Gray. And so here was my mother running down the sidewalk with this crazy woman chasing her down with a knife. And so my dad went outside. First he called the military police, the MPs. The MPs showed up. But that was a moment of unlearning for me. And again, I said to my dad, because it was just really foreign to me, Dad, what just happened? And again, he said to me, we can live our life one way, Denise, but it doesn't mean everyone lives that way. And we don't know what Mrs. Gray's experience has been. She's from Mississippi. And it's probably the first time Mrs. Gray has ever lived next door to a white family. Man, that was a moment of unlearning and learning, that you can be as kind as you want to be, and that doesn't mean that everybody else's experience has made them a kind person. I had to relearn real quick. Yeah. You were right about that, Rob. Unlearning is essential in IT. My husband also works in the IT world. And he's always unlearning and relearning. Man, you've got to be quick in the mind, very adept brains. Holly is saying, oh my gosh, I could live in that location in your basement. Yeah, a lot of people can. A lot of people can. A lot of times we can learn about gender roles. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Based on our upbringing, our culture. Right? The culture that we grew up in. I didn't grow up in one certain culture because, again, I grew up in a military family, which meant that I grew up in lots and lots of cultures. I grew up with people of every kind of culture, ethnicity, disposition. I had a lot of unlearning to do once my father retired from the military, and we settled down in communities that had been communities for a great good long time with their own social mores and ways of being. I think one of the great ways that the universe helps us to unlearn something is that they'll send a situation or a person into our lives to change things up in our mind. Long time ago, oh gosh, I guess maybe 20 years ago, if that's a long time, I don't know. I'm going to pour a little more coffee here. I brought a carafe of some Southern Pecan coffee up here to the studio today. There we go. Yum. Oh, hey, Sally. Welcome back in, and thank you for your tenacity. I appreciate you, Sally, for many things. Long time ago, I had this girlfriend, and her father was very racist. Very racist. I mean, he was kind of a nice dude, but I could never get over the fact that her dad was just a racist. I mean, he did not like anybody with any shade of any color on their skin other than ivory. Right? And wouldn't you know, because I think this is how the universe helps us. My friend, his daughter fell in love with a black man, an African-American man. Well, let's just say that didn't go over very well. At all. At all. And so there was a real disconnect in that family, and it was sad to watch my friend suffer because she fell in love with somebody that didn't fit her father's paradigm of what was okay, what was normal, what was socially acceptable. And then the day came that my friend and her new husband, and no, her father would not go to the wedding. They had a child together, and now all of a sudden, this very racist man had a grandbaby. The cutest little bugger, oh my goodness. Oh, now he's a young man. Cuter than a bug. I think they still live somewhere in California. I'm not sure. I've lost track of them all these years. And all of a sudden, the introduction of this young, innocent life, a grandchild, happened. And my friend's father had one of those moments of epiphany, kind of like when the Grinch, right, is descending upon Whoville, and Max the dog, right, all of a sudden he's on the sled with him, and the Grinch's heart grew, and right. I always vision sometimes moments of unlearning to be like that. And all of a sudden, my friend's dad's heart grew because there was a baby involved, an innocent child. And the rest of the story goes that he unlearned, wherever he learned it from. Sometimes maybe it's a past life we come into this lifetime with some things, right? We don't always know where it comes from. But the universe creator gives us opportunities to unlearn, for our eyes to open wide to new possibilities. And this grandfather fell in absolute love with this child. And I believe that that child came in to Granddaddy's life to teach him, to open up his heart. He went from being a man that was so incredibly racist that he wouldn't even go to his own daughter's wedding, to a man that, proud as a peacock, strutting around with this darling little boy with chocolatey brown skin and big brown eyes. This is my grandson. Isn't he beautiful? Inseparable. Inseparable they became. Yep, I agree with you there. Yeah, we're just subdivisions of humanity. We're subdivisions. And honestly, the more we have conversations with people, good conversations with people, really good conversations with people, we come to understand how much we really are alike. And how many of the good books, by whatever label they have on the front of them, really come down to do unto others as you would, have done unto you. Be good to one another. Love one another. Years ago, I was listening to an imam from Kalamazoo area. And he stood up in front of everybody and he said, "How many of you believe in God, in a creative force?" And, everybody in the room raised their hand and he said, "How many of you have read the Quran?" Very few people raised their hand. And again, he asked the question, "How many of you are believers?" And we all raised our hand again. And he said, "The book of the Quran begins, this book is for believers. Believers in a creator. Believers in a universal mind, a God. If you are all believers, then this book is also for you." Well, of course, you know me, I had to run out that very afternoon to Schuler Books and get a copy of the Quran. And I read it. That was also a moment of unlearning and relearning. Sometimes we have to unlearn what we think we know about people. What we think we know. Maybe what we think we know based on social media, or what we think we may know because maybe they have written a book that we've read, or they have a cool show on TV, or maybe we have to relearn what we've learned about people based on what other people have opinioned or opined about them to us. Sometimes we have to unlearn that. I'll never forget years ago when somebody said to me, "Well, you're not at all what I thought you were going to be. I thought you were going to be this." And it was all based on her preconception of what she thought I was going to look like. How tall she thought I was going to be. She thought that I would have long, silvery, flowing hair. And I've heard that over the years. You're not at all what I thought you were going to be. I thought you were going to be really uptight. I had a client a couple of weeks ago who came to see me, and she and her husband came to see me, and one of her first statements was, I was a little apprehensive to come to see you, Denise. And I said, well, why is that? And she said, I had always had a notion that you're a very religious woman. I said, religious? Like, tell me, in what way religious? Religious like a nun religious? Religious like I'm going to rap you on the knuckles with a ruler? She said, yeah, like that. Oh, I said, so you thought that because I'm partial to spirituality and spiritual pathways, and I write about mysticism and the mystics, that in your mind, that equates to dogma, judgment, punishment. And she said, exactly. Well, by the end of our time together, she and I and her husband, she said, well, you are not at all what I thought you were going to be. You didn't judge us based on what we came here about. You certainly weren't about punishing us or sending us away with a penance. I said, no. But thank you for taking the opportunity to unlearn and to relearn who I am. Have you ever had that with anybody in your life where you meet them and you talk to them and they're just way cooler than you thought they were going to be? Or maybe it's the opposite. You think, oh, vey, I thought you were going to be really awesome and you're kind of an asshat. You ever have that happen? Yeah. Marianne says, wow, I get that too. People see me all wrong than what I really am. Yeah, sometimes it can be based on the way we're dressed or something we put on Facebook or something like that, Instagram, and people get a thought. And usually the thought is based on what they've learned about what they're seeing or what they're hearing about the way somebody dresses or the way that they speak or the way that they look. Unlearning. I think this is a really great conversation, and I'm glad that you're all in the chat room with me or out there listening. I think that every day, just about every day, gives us an opportunity, maybe not to unlearn, but maybe to expand. Just do have to unlearn something that we were taught, like only certain people go to heaven, or only certain people are deserving enough of a good education. Only certain people are deserving of love. I think that animals help us unlearn and relearn. The other day I put a photo of my horse Tussie, on Facebook. You know, Lectus, my Tussie, is one of my greatest teachers, and she's helped me to unlearn a whole lot of stuff. She is a fearless warrior, that Lectus. Recently, she had one of her eyes removed. And I wondered what that was going to be like for her at 22 years old. She's shown me, let me just say. She showed me what it's like to be somebody who can overcome. And when I go out there, we work on that, going around, out in the paddock and in the show arena, with one eye. She teaches me how to see differently. Because horses don't see what's directly in front of them. They see usually in a little bit what's in front, but mostly from the side. So she's teaching me about trust. Trust on the blind side of things. And Heaven, my other baby girl in that paddock right there, is helping me learn about companionship, because it is astounding how heaven helps Tussie on her blind side. She's kind of become another set of eyes for Lectus. Now, Lectus has no idea in her mind that she looks any different, and Lectus is a show horse, so she's a girly girl. She likes pink and she likes purple and lavender. So all of her halters and her lead ropes and all of that, her saddle pad, she likes the girly girl colors, sometimes teal. She has no idea she looks any different. And in her mind, she's still the show arena princess, right? She's one of those halter horses. She just needs to stand there and be beautiful. That's what she was bred to do. That's what she was trained to do. And I had to help her unlearn that she doesn't have to always be on show. She doesn't always have to be on point. I had to help her unlearn that, and heaven has helped her unlearn that. Because heaven, frankly, wants nothing to do with the show arena, and she is my medicine horse. So Lectus has helped us understand courage and relearning how to be in the world. And heaven has helped Lectus understand that we don't always have to be on point. We don't always have to be perfect. Heaven teaches Tussie how to roll in the mud better than anybody, because if heaven is clean for more than 5 minutes, that's a record. So I watch how they have helped one another unlearn and relearn, to expand, to become more than. We learn from our animals, I believe. We expand. I think animals can teach us more about compassion and love than we can teach one another. There are so many opportunities to unlearn. I think the question often is, are we brave enough to unlearn? Are we brave enough to expand upon what we've already learned? Are we brave enough to admit that maybe we have 2 feet, sometimes 3 feet? Maybe we just have 2 curious feet, and maybe they're not ensconced really in any 2 of anything. Is it okay to unlearn that we have to be a certain thing, a certain way? And are we brave enough then to learn that we just need to be our way? Are we brave enough to be that? Are we brave enough, some of us, to come out of the closet? Whatever the closet happens to be. For me, the closet was at the age of 30 when I actually came out. Thank you to Sonia Choquette and my spiritual director at the Dominican Center. Coming out of the mystic's closet. Not that people in my life didn't already know that there was something about me, but that year 2004 or 5 when I came out at the newspaper. And the editor at the time, Mike Lloyd, said, I'm going to write the editorial column on Sunday, my column about you. He and I still talk about that because now he's the president of Broadway Grand Rapids here in Grand Rapids. He's the president of Broadway. And so he and I every once in a while will exchange emails with one another. He'll send me a little blurb that says, you got to see this one. Come on, get tickets for Hamilton. You got to go here. Come on, Dee. And don't remember that time when you came out? Sometimes, we provide the opportunity for others to unlearn. For me, it was the publication of my first book, Meditations from the Temple Within. And that book was published, and Mike Lloyd said, my Sunday column is going to be all about you and my belief in you. I know who you are after all of these years, and I believe you. And here in West Michigan, you're going to raise some eyebrows, particularly in the Christian Reformed corridor. You're going to raise eyebrows. So I'm going to write my column, and we're going to have everybody on high alert out in the newsroom. And he did, because Sunday morning, bright and early, was the first phone call. And it was from a man who was dying. And it came through the sports department. Bob Becker, our sports editor at the time, got a hold of me and he said, "Hey, Dee, I've got a live one from Zealand this morning." I said, "Thanks, Bob, I appreciate it." And the phone calls went on for an entire week. And they were all, frankly, they were wonderful phone calls. People saying, "Thank goodness that you and Mike Lloyd were brave enough to say something right out loud in writing about something that many of us have been fearful of broaching with our minister, with our pastor, with our priest." And you two put it right out there. And at the time, I think the subscriber ratio on Sunday, or the subscriber count on Sunday, was close to 225,000 people. But the first phone call came in from a man who had brain cancer. "Hey, Del." "Yeah, you're right, Sally. It was great. It was great of Mike to do that." And, he closed his Sunday editorial by saying, "I know Denise and I believe in her. I don't experience what she experiences, but I believe in her as a human being and as a person. We're friends." I still have that column. But when John called me that morning through the sports department, he said, "Denise, it's Monday morning and I shouldn't be here." I said, "What do you mean by that, John?" He said, "Well, let me back up a moment. My name is John and I am dying from brain cancer. Saturday evening, I went to church and I told my minister after church that my mother comes to visit me from spirit almost every evening, and she comforts me. She comforts me. And in the comfort, she lets me know that when my time comes, she'll be there for me." And so he openly shared this with his minister, to which the minister replied, "You are hallucinating. When you are dead, you are dead. There is nothing more. Your brain cancer has taken over your faculties, and I'm sorry, John," and I'm just using the name John, "you're hallucinating. This isn't real." I said, "Oh my goodness, John, I'm so sorry to hear that." He said, "Well, one of my favorite things in my life is Sunday morning breakfast and coffee and reading the newspaper. In particular, I love reading Mike Lloyd's Sunday editorial column." He said, "Let me tell you what my plan was going to be yesterday. My plan was that I was going to get up, have a little bit of breakfast, some coffee, read Mike Lloyd's editorial column, and I was going to take my own life. Because I'm suffering if I'm delusional, if I'm hallucinating. And frankly, Denise, if this is all there is anyway and there's nothing else, there's really not a whole lot to worry about. So I might as well end my suffering and get on with things." But apparently there's nothing to get on to, according to my minister. And then I read Mike Lloyd's column, and I read what you had to say. "I'm not delusional, am I, Denise?" And I said, "No, John, you are not delusional. The love that your mother has for you and you have for your mother supersedes all time, all space, physicality. You are connected to her, and from her place in spirit, her soul, her spirit reaches out to you to say, when it's your turn, honey, I'm going to be there for you. That's real. In my world, that's real." And John and I went on to have a great conversation. And he said, "Thank you for helping me. This has been a real shock to my system. And I need to sit and I need to think about what I was taught and what I heard on Saturday night and what the truth is for me. I know what I know in my heart to be true, Denise. I said, isn't the heart a great thing when it's balanced with the mind? It tells us a whole lot of stuff, and sometimes it's contrary to what we've learned or been taught or what we think we were taught, that we just kind of innately know, that leaves room for growth. So sometimes we are taught things by people that we hold in high regard. And it can be a real undoing to unlearn perhaps what we've been taught by somebody we hold in high regard. Well, that whole week I heard from ministers around West Michigan, from Northern Michigan. Thank you for having the courage to talk about these things. Shh, nobody wants to talk about that. I said, talk about what? The life of spirit? That angels are real? That we're more than just this physical life? Well, yeah, Denise. I mean, we all suppose that that's real. I said, no, apparently not all of us suppose that that's real. I've had phone calls to the contrary. I only had like one phone call from a minister who said, thanks to you, I need to go in a direction at my church that I really wasn't wanting to go. And that's in the direction of what you were talking about with regard to spirit and angels and the afterlife. I said, oh, so I've made you uncomfortable because you have to expand what it is that you're offering your parishioners. Yes. And, I gave him credit for the fact that he even admitted that it was making him uncomfortable to have to offer something more than what he had been offering all these years from the pulpit and Bible study. That's something. I have sometimes people say to me, how come you call God creator? Which kind of makes my eyeballs click. What do you mean? Why do I call God creator? There are many names for that creative force in the universe. Well, why don't you just say God? And I said, well, in my mind, from what I learned and what I've been taught, God is too limiting a word for me. And that's just me. Creator for me, and that's just me, is a little more expansive, leaves room for a little bit more. I like that, creator. Doesn't, to me, say creating just one thing. There are people who have to unlearn that dogs and cats and horses, animals in general, don't go to heaven. Right? Some people are taught that animals don't have a spirit, they don't have a soul. I've helped a whole lot of people maybe at least ponder that there might be a different truth about that. Yeah. Del Marie is saying, I think life is about learning every day, always new things to think about and believe in. Yeah, I agree, Del. I agree. Relearning. Sometimes it can be something as simple as finally learning that you can say no. What if you were taught that it's just not right to ever say no? Sometimes for some people, the first time they tell somebody, no, I don't have time for that, or no, I'm not putting up with that crapola anymore, they're scared because they said no. Denise, I don't know what's going to happen. I said no. Oh my goodness, really? You created a boundary? Some people have to learn that they can have boundaries, that it's okay to say no, that it's okay to say, this is what I will allow and this is what I won't allow in my life, in my mind, in my heart, in my soul, in my psyche, whatever it is. For some people, unlearning that is huge. And conversely to that, some people have to unlearn that you get to say yes sometimes. You get to say, I think I'm just going to do that by myself. Thank you very much. I once had a woman say to me that she went to dinner by herself for the very first time. She was scared. It was scary for her to actually go to dinner by herself for the very first time. I said, well, why was that scary for you? She said, well, I always had it in my mind that only lonely people who are alone in the world, depressed people, sad people, rejected people, go to dinner alone. I said, wow. I go to dinner or lunch by myself often. You do? I said, yeah. Sometimes I just want to be alone with my own thoughts while I'm having a meal. Or sometimes there's a restaurant maybe that I want to go to, nobody else wants to. I go by myself. Frankly, I enjoy it. Oh my goodness, really, Denise? Yeah, kind of liberating to take yourself outside of what somebody else might think about you. I said, was the real problem that you were having lunch by yourself and you were thinking that other people were projecting onto you that you must be a lonely, depressed, sad person because you were there at the restaurant by yourself? She said, yes. Sometimes we have to unlearn our own projections about what other people might be thinking about something. Right? Oh, this has been like a real hot topic with me lately because many of you have probably seen my tattoo work. My entire back is being tattooed. It will be from top to literally bottom tattoo work. Some person recently said to me, why would you do that to your body? Why would you do that? And it was said in a way like in a disapproving, judgmental way. And I said, well, why wouldn't I? It's my body and I'm putting art on my body and it's meaningful art. It's ancestral art. It's tribal art I'm having put on my back. And so I flipped up a photo of what's being tattooed on my back. Well, what's that symbol? It looks like a Japanese symbol. So for those of you that have seen the photo of my back, there's a crescent moon. In the crescent moon, it's full of symbols. And one of the symbols at the top looks like Japanese kanji, but it is not. It is African. It is Congolese. It is Zulu, in fact. And what that symbol means is the Almighty is all. It is the African symbol for the Almighty is all. Oh, she said, well, that's kind of cool. I said, well, that, is honoring my African roots, my African grandmothers and grandfathers, having that there. Well, what about this next symbol? I said, oh, that's the four directions. But it's not just, the four directions isn't relegated to Native America. It's also Scandinavian. It's also Norse. Sometimes we have to unlearn symbology. Oh, I didn't know that four direction symbol was also pertinent to the Norse people. I said, yeah. So there it is. And I said, below that you'll see my chanupa, the bowl of my chanupa. Pretty soon there will be some eagle feathers underneath that. That's in honor of my Seminole and my Cherokee grandfather. Grandpa King was a Cherokee man, and on the other side they were Seminole. Oh, well, what about this part on the left side of your whole back? I said, well, that is obviously Celtic knotwork, and that celebrates my Welsh, my Irish, my Scottish ancestors, that knotwork. And it's all being done very meticulously. It tells a story. I'm wearing the story of my ancestors on my back, and that raven and that crown of willow, that willow represents several things. It represents the magic in my bloodline. On all sides of my bloodline, my people are mystics. And that willow crown also represents my sweat lodge because it's made of willow. Oh, she said, well, this is like a tapestry of like really meaningful things. I said, again, this is the artwork of my ancestors. This is my tribal artwork. Well, by the end, she had unlearned everything she had ever learned about women who wear tattoos. And maybe in that moment, she thought to herself, geez, maybe I'll go get a little something, something. I don't know. But her preconception about people who wear tattoos started out with, I can't believe you did that to your body. Why would you do that to your body? And I said, well, let's take a look at what I've done to my body, or with my body, or in my case, for my body. All of a sudden, there was a moment of understanding that it was sacred artwork. Hours and hours and hours, and I've got hours and hours and hours of it to go. On my back, I wear my ancestors on my skin and in my skin now. So, like, how many of us have ever had a preconceived notion about people who are tattooed? That's only for bikers, right? That's only for tramps. That's only for, right? Oh, thanks, Katie. Rob is saying Judaism forbids it. The Maori culture requires it. Well, thanks, Katie. She says the artwork is beautiful. Yeah, in some cultures, you don't tattoo yourself. I remember the first time, Del, remember when I went up to the Northern Cheyenne Reservation with Chue Barb and Davian for the grandmother's gathering? Grandmother Agnes Pilgrim Baker, the grandmother from the beautiful state of Oregon, who Baker Mountain is now named after. I remember seeing Grandmother Agnes, one of the 13 indigenous grandmothers, and she had that amazing tattoo work on her face. 2 lines coming down from her chin, wrapping under her chin. And there she was, like 90 years old with this, rocking this tat work on her face. And I was so enamored by that. And then I saw some of the other tribal women from Grandmother Agnes's tribe that had come to the gathering there on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation in Lame Deer. And then I started noticing some of the other indigenous women from the Northwest Corridor of Turtle Island and their tattoo wear, to your point, Rob. And I thought to myself, man, if I ever find out for sure in this lifetime what my bloodline is, like there it is, and my family are telling me about it, I'm getting myself some tat work. And I did. I just went a little bit big, right? Go big or go home, I guess was my thought at the time. But what do we think about people? I had one gal say to me, putting a tattoo on a woman is like putting a bumper sticker on a Ferrari. I'm like, wow, dang, there's a thought, there's an opinion. But what about, and thank you, Sally, for that. I did take the time to talk about it. That was a moment to help maybe somebody think outside the box about that. I can't wait for the day when my grandson says to me, Granny, talk to me about those tattoos, because it's also the story, my grandson's story. It's the story of his matrilineal people on my back, symbolically speaking. And what does it all mean? What does it represent? I think, Del, you are a great one. Yeah, Grandmother Agnes passed away. Holly, that's funny. Grandmother Agnes was a force to be reckoned with. Here's somebody that helped people unlearn some things. Grandmother Agnes went to the governor of her state and said, we need to change the name of Squaw Mountain. Because that word squaw is a derogatory term for a Native American woman. How many people know that? How many people know that squaw is a derogatory term? Because if you watch a John Wayne movie or any of those old B-rated movies, maybe they've used that term. Maybe it was on, The Lone Ranger. I don't know. But Grandmother Agnes Pilgrim Baker went to the governor and said, we need to change the name of that mountain, and here's why. Well, Grandmother's native name was actually Morning Star. Right? She was a morning star. The governor, went through all the channels that needed to be channeled through, and the mountain was renamed Baker Mountain, Morning Star Mountain. It was an opportunity to learn. Now, if you don't know something, I always say, you only know what you know. I only know what I know. And so having an opportunity to know something different, to me, is exciting. And I never hold people responsible for something that they've only ever known. If they've not ever had an opportunity to know something different. Parents, sometimes we hold them accountable for things that they didn't know. They only knew what they knew. Yeah. Sally's saying, I didn't know that. Rob is saying, that I knew, right? Rob is saying the Japanese culture views it as a mark of criminality. Yeah. Well, even let's take Todd, for instance. Todd is an executive at a company, a firm out of Boston. And when he first started getting tattoos, he would not have dreamed of getting tattoos below the elbow. Because if he were wearing a short sleeve shirt, he would not want to present to a client or to his employees, frankly, having tattoos below the elbow that could be seen. And that has changed. My good friend Cad, David Sturkin, he and I, when Todd was in the hospital all that time last month and this month, David and I were talking about tattoos, and that the hospital that he works at recently loosened up on where the tattoos could be on an employee's body. Right? Could they show a little bit? So people are having maybe a different view about these things, having a different look. And Del, will you weigh in on this? Because you talk about this quite often. Is that even the face of Native America is changing. The face of Native America is changing, and so we have to unlearn. And why am I bringing this up? Well, in West Michigan, when we talk about the Native American community, a lot of the community members look different. In fact, I think it was me and you and Angie, Guy's wife. We were talking about this at Guy's funeral in October, about, green-eyed Indians and blue-eyed Indians. And you talked about it when you gave your tribute, when we all went up there as sisters to give tributes to Guy at the funeral. To unlearn and relearn, what does a Native American look like? Well, a Native American, when I go to the Native American Education Program on behalf of my foundation, isn't going to look perhaps like all of the Native Americans maybe that I see on the Cheyenne River Reservation or anywhere else. That we can also have to unlearn what a group of people looks like. Not all Irish people have red hair. Depends on if they have Scandinavian roots, right? Some people still believe that all Irish people have red hair. So we get to unlearn what people look like. And maybe relearn the possibilities of what they do look like. What's the definition of somebody who is Seminole? I'll never forget Aunt Dot when she announced all of my cousins that our grandfather, her father, my grandfather was a Cherokee man. I'm guessing Creek and Cherokee from the south of Georgia. I mean, they'd never talked about it because in some corridors, especially down there, you're an American. There's not a delineation of who had what and where and why. Aunt Dot said we're all Americans. Your grandfather, however, was Native American. He was a Cherokee man. And then Donna, my cousin Donna, chimed in, and on the other side, they're Seminole. And so we can pigeonhole people. We have to unlearn pigeonholing people. Native Americans are the only people that I'm aware of that are quantified by blood rather than just who they are. Well, how much percentage? How much blood? Wow, that's really something, isn't it? That's really something. How about just being who we are and accepting who we are? I always appreciate that about Del. Here in West Michigan, whenever I go to an event, everyone assumes that I'm going to check in as a tribal member. They look at me and they say, well, you're a tribal member, so, whatever it is they see about me, right? Those Seminole and Cherokee roots that I wear. And other places I go to and people will say to me, oh, you're part black. They can see it, right? Our blood recognizes. And other people will say, what? What do you mean you're part African? I met my new doctor a couple weeks ago, Dr. Kakarala. She, Mudri Kakarala. Oh, I love her. Anybody in West Michigan, if you're looking for a new internist, she is the bee's knees over on East Paris. Anyway, she and I were talking about me, and she was doing, a once-over, and she said what all my doctors say. Oh, she said, you're not 100% Caucasian, are you? Nope. Well, let's talk about that for a minute, she said. So we went over the genetics. She said, oh, that's good to know. That's good to know. We need to know all of that. Just by looking at me, looking at my skin for 2 seconds, she said, oh, you're not 100% Caucasian. Nope. Huh. Del Marie is saying, still a big problem for isolated people to accept the ever-changing world, especially the mixture of races. Right on, Del. Right on. And I so appreciate, because Del Marie, she's an elder. She is a tribal elder. And when she gets up, and the people, everyone knows, if Auntie Del is getting up or Grandma Del is getting up, she's going to have a teaching moment. We all get to learn something. And that happened at Guy's funeral. She always takes a moment to teach. That's why I'm so happy. If you ever get a chance to listen to her show, Walk a Good Life, here on the podcasts, it's great teaching moments. And I'll tell you what, Del Marie rattles cages. And I love that about her. People who want to stick to an old thought, Del Marie doesn't go for that. She doesn't go for that. Let's think about some new thoughts. I think that all of us, probably wherever we are listening to this, you all have amazing lives. You have amazing thoughts, amazing pathways. You're learning, you're expanding. You're positing new questions, planting seeds, cracking open maybe a little crack in a rough surface or a closed mind. Bravo. And sometimes we can be the person that gets cracked open, right? So a new thought can come in. I say allow it. Sit with it. Be with it. Pray about it. Sometimes we have to pray about it a little bit. That was Del's last show, Being with Prayer. Sometimes we have to sit with something for a minute. Boy, my cousin's there for a whole hot minute. If any of you are listening, Bobby, if you're listening, you remember when Aunt Dot started talking about family genetics. There were some big eyeballs in the room. Those that, maybe they never considered being of mixed race. Stir in the pot. Sometimes that's how we unlearn and relearn. It's because somebody, maybe us, has stirred the pot. Be a pot stirrer in a good way. Allowing is good. Hey, Donna. There's my cousin Donna. See, one of the things I appreciate about my cousin Donna King is that she is a flight attendant. So Donna flies all over the world. And Donna, you can attest to the fact that maybe since who was once lost has been found, it's opened up some great dialogue about some things. There have been lots of opportunities to unlearn and learn. I know I've had to unlearn and learn since my biological family rediscovered me and I rediscovered them, or discovered. I've had to unlearn some things about myself and relearn some things about myself, learn about who my biological mother and father were, relearn about who my grandparents were, right? It's exciting. Shifting the paradigm. Unlearning and relearning, allowing for great conversation. Donna and I have had some amazing conversations. It's fun to find out similarities. I didn't know she liked the Allman Brothers. So boy, we were on that day, weren't we, cousin? Who wants to go to the Allman Brother Museum in Macon? It's just up the road a piece. She was like, I do. Let's go. Todd had no clue about the Allman Brothers. God bless him. Right? He's just that much younger than me and not into that kind of music. As me and Donna, we were all over that, going to the Allman Brothers Museum. Todd, he unlearned some things, what he ever thought about Southern rock or what have you, and he's now an Allman Brother fan, and Skinnerd now too. Yeah. Donna and I, he had to kind of pull us out of there. Frankly, we were having so much fun. Donna's saying, absolutely, and you are helping us to navigate the oceans of the past. Yeah. Nikki's like, what? How could he not know them? Yeah, he didn't. He's like, he had heard of them, but he was kind of into that whole techno stuff in the 80s. And he was born like a lot, well, yeah, he wasn't really exposed to it, to that music. And I grew up with it. Me and Kelly, we were all over that. Leonard Skinner, Allman Brothers. And Donna, that's a really great point. Isn't that the truth? Sometimes we have to unlearn and relearn about the past, our own past. Because sometimes what we've learned about our past has been through the eyes of somebody else who told us something that they thought they knew about our past. Or maybe we're taught something about our past that nobody wanted to talk about, and we have to reframe the past and go, ooh, dang, really? I didn't know that. I always thought. So-and-so always told me. Oh my goodness, I didn't know that happened, right? There's an unlearning and a relearning. Or sometimes it's really, oh, well, I was told something else happened. Well, that's not so bad. We're told through perspectives sometimes when we have to unlearn what we learned about family members or family history or how things went down. We can rely sometimes on the gossip hotline or who in the family tends to be the one that knows all the stuff or passes on the juice, or you know what I'm saying. The whole operator thing, the tin can on a string. We get to unlearn and relearn. Or maybe we learned something as a child and it really is different when you look at it as an adult. Sometimes it looks worse when you look at it as an adult because you didn't know any better. Sometimes it looks better when you're as an adult and you think, well, that's not so bad. But allowing for the opportunity, being open. Recently, Todd's mom was over and she said to me, I think one of the most beautiful things about your experience about learning who you are, learning about your blood and your bones, is that the family that you have is astounding. It's beautiful. It's loving. I said, it is incredible. I am one of those blessed people that has been welcomed home in such astounding ways. And I feel for people who are those that discover their biological roots and they're not welcomed. I have not experienced that. And maybe it's because anybody who would not want to welcome me just has stayed away. And that's okay too. But I'm also very aware that my entrance into the family has people rethinking who my daddy was and who my mama was. I know that. To think all of a sudden that Billy King had a little girl right there in Georgia, a cousin maybe that they could have grown up with, that makes for a pause. The same thing is true on the other side. Recently, my cousin Sheila reached out, and cousin Corey, about going up to New Jersey. You know, my grandparents came here from Amsterdam in 1917, and many of them didn't move far away from Ellis Island, wanting to go up there and take a look, unlearning what they ever thought they knew about their Aunt Connie, my mom. What do you mean she had a baby? Well, I'm getting to the root of all of that, by the way. What about that Dr. Hicks down in Georgia, who sold babies, who told some mothers that their child had died overnight only to sell them out the back door in Chattanooga or there in Georgia? What about that? Unlearning who I am at the beginning of my story, unlearning our story and relearning our story. How many people right now, thanks to 23andMe and Ancestry, are learning their real story, having to unlearn what they learned about themselves? Well, I kind of always knew in my heart of hearts who I was. So for me, it's like all of this is the proof in the pudding. It's really a wonderful feeling. Absolutely, Donna. Yeah, we didn't have the facilities back then to dig deeper. And sometimes people just wanted to protect the children. You don't need to know about that. Marianne, you do. I love that, though. And it's always in a good way, Marianne. Rob is saying, if you can't deal with shattering of paradigms, you don't deserve to call yourself a seeker of truth. Oh, yeah, because sometimes, woof, your paradigm is shattered about some things. Absolutely it is. I remember, and I'm going to get to the root of all of this, and I'll report what I find, everybody. But years ago, my husband Steve and I, we hired my law professor from college to open my birth records. I think this was probably around maybe the year 1998 or 1999. Somewhere in that realm. Now, mind you, both of my parents were still alive. My biological parents were still alive at that time. But Steve and I had decided that we were going to have my birth records opened. And I, got a hold of my law professor and said, Sharon, can you dig this up for me? Well, she dug it up all right. And she called me to her office and she looked at me, and I was young, so maybe it was like 1995. Both of the kids, maybe it was 95. Both the kids were quite young. And she looked at me and she said, Denise, some things are just better left unknown. I have your birth. She didn't say birth records. I have your records here from Georgia. And some things are just better left unknown. And I'm just going to leave it like this. And I'm just going to file this away. Well, I was so young at the time. And, she had a way about her. She was very authoritarian. And I thought, holy crap, who are my parents? Oh my goodness. What is my story? It must be really horrible. If Sharon is saying, here's your hat, what's your hurry? Shoving me out the door, because that's literally what she did. And I got back to the newspaper, and my boss at the time, Pete Baker, said, what are you doing back already? And I said, Pete, the strangest thing just happened, and my head is reeling. And he asked me what happened. I said, she told me that what she found was so dreadful. She doesn't want to share it with me because she thinks it'll shatter me. And he looked at me and he said, but don't you want to know? And I said, I don't know that I do, so I think I just need to let it be for right now. I just need to let it be for right now. And fast forward all these years later to my niece, Sarah, and my daughter, Elise, saying to me, hey, Mom, have you seen that special on TV, Taken at Birth? Have you watched the documentary about Dr. Hicks? And I said, I heard about Dr. Hicks quite a while ago. And I went to Georgia to have our wonderful family reunion in October down in Hawkinsville. And I came back. I waited until after the family reunion to watch the documentary, Taken at Birth. And for those of you that have watched it, you know where I'm heading with all of this. And it was interesting because even Dr. Kakarala, when she said to me, you know, you're not 100% Caucasian. So what are you? And let's talk about that. And she said, you know, one of my fellow doctors has been watching this documentary called Taken at Birth about a Dr. Hicks in Georgia. Does that sound familiar to you? She said, can you believe that some of those mothers were actually told that their children had died? And there were death certificates issued rather than birth certificates issued for those children born between 1961 and 1963. Some of them have death certificates, not birth certificates. And I said, isn't that fascinating? Right. And in the interim, I've reached out to a private investigator here in Grand Rapids because I was told, don't bring this up in certain corridors, because what people are now learning about all of that, all of the goings on in the late 50s and mid 60s between that part of Georgia and Chattanooga, Tennessee, is shattering paradigms. It's rattling cages. The truth is being exposed. So we'll see what it was that Sharon didn't want to share with me. And maybe what she didn't want to share is the fact that originally there's a death certificate for me and not a birth certificate, which would explain why my dad said to me, I was just told to fill out this birth certificate, and he literally filled it out with a pen, as though I was your biological father, Denise. I was just told to white out the information the first couple had written and just, write about me as though I'm your father. I said, but Dad, there's not even a mention of a hospital on this form. Is this even a legal form? There's no doctor, there's no hospital. He said, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it, honey? So we'll see what it is that I'm about to unlearn and relearn, or learn for the first time, or remember, and I'll share it with you all. I mean, you all know this journey that I'm on. We'll find out what it is I'm going to relearn. Some people have to unlearn that family is more than just blood. For some people, only the tight-knit little tiny clan means family. Well, I learned at a very early age that family for me has a completely different definition. Completely different definition. Some people think that if the bloodline isn't cohesive through everybody that you call family, then that's not family. I disagree with that. If somebody asks me, do I have sisters? You bet I have sisters. You bet I do. They're pretty kick-ass ladies, too. Del Marie, Barbara, Cheryl, Della. They're amazing sisters. Do I have grandchildren? I do. I have some astounding Takoshas out there. You bet I do. And they are my family. My brother Guy, my brother Don. My brother Don doesn't live too far from here. As I explained to Don's mother, it was a beautiful thing. I performed the wedding for my brother's son a couple years back. And Don has since met his biological mother and father, and his mother and her husband were there at my nephew's wedding. It was a beautiful wedding at Frederick Meyer Garden. And of course, I had never met his mother, his biological mother. We were raised by our adoptive mother, but his biological mother walked up to me at one point, and we engaged in a conversation. And at one point, I looked at her and I said, you are not my mother. You did not give birth to me. You did not raise me. You are not my mother, but I will have you know that your son, who is your biological son, is my brother, and I love him. And she looked at me and she said, you're right, I'm not your mother, and I didn't raise you. And you're also right about one thing. Your brother loves you very much. You are his sister. I said, that's right. And isn't that a blessing? And what a beautiful day we're all gathered here as family, bloodline or not. And the beauty of that was the photographer was wrapping up photos, and Don yelled, wait a minute, we need one more photo. And the photographer stood there and he said, I need a photo with my sister. And so the very last photo of that evening was me with my brother Don. Sometimes we have to unlearn that family can also be friends that have become your family. It can also become family members through adoption, like, the making of the relatives. The making of the relatives. Those ceremonies, sacred ceremonies. We've done that making of the relative ceremonies a couple of times, huh, Chue? Family, by definition, there's the bloodline and there's family. And for some people, that's a real stretch. And you know what I'm talking about. Holly's saying, your life, Denise, would make for a fascinating movie. So many facets. That's what my doctor said to me. One of these days, you need to make a movie about it. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't that be something? Always an opportunity to think and rethink and unlearn and relearn, even about ourselves. Ever catch yourself thinking about something and you think to yourself, is that really right? Am I really thinking what I think I'm thinking? I need to rethink that. Why am I still thinking that? Or why do I think that way? Why do I think that way? My cousin Corey came up here from Florida. I had an opinion about Dutch people because I live here in West Michigan. And the Dutch people in West Michigan apparently are quite different than the Dutch people who actually come from the Netherlands and who still live there in the Netherlands. Quite a different paradigm, but it's based on religion here, not the people themselves. And, when I found out that my mother is 100,000% Dutch from the Netherlands, right? It took me a minute. I thought, oh, Lordy, I guess I better rethink what I think about and what I think I know about Dutch people based on what I think I know about them here in West Michigan. Those same people that called me after my first book was published, right there in the corridor of the Dutch Reformed corridor here in West Michigan, having to relearn. So I think I'm probably going to take a trip to the Netherlands and visit some of my cousins and my aunties and things, great aunties and what have you, that live there in Amsterdam. I want to go to the Van Gogh Museum anyway. I love Van Gogh. I love the Dutch masters, always have. So having to unlearn about my thoughts about Dutch people, what does that mean? And relearn what it really means. That was a stretch. My first Delftware came from Corey. She's like, we need to reframe this for you. Whatever it was that you thought. I said, I'll show you. So when she got here, she said, will you take me to Holland, Michigan? I said, yep, let's go. Can you hear the enthusiasm? Yep, let's go. And we had a wonderful time, don't get me wrong. We went to Windmill Village and learned about windmills and all of that kind of a thing. So in honor of my mother, I will go to the Netherlands. I will go to Amsterdam. Because that's her, Unlearning and relearning. Yeah. And who they are and where they come from. Yeah. Absolutely, Del. And that's what I'm trying to do, is to do all of that. And frankly, it's been a little tough for my kids, Dane and Elise. It's been a little tough to unlearn and relearn. Not so much for Dane, because Dane is Dane. It was, oh my goodness, amazing. Last week, my cousin Wanda texted me some photos of her grandson, Spencer. And I thought she was texting me photos of my son, Dane. And I texted them to Dane, and he said, holy crap, Ma. I said, that's your cousin, Spencer. Wow, he said. But Dane has always been very partial to the South. He's always loved going south. The minute we get anywhere near the South, Dane has always loved it since he was a little boy. He feels very at home down south. Yep, and there goes Gabe. Okay, Gabe. So having to learn about family history. My kids are having to do that. Gabe, it's okay, buddy. It's all right. Yep, it's okay. All done. So they're having an opportunity to learn and unlearn. And, as Elise said, Elise absolutely positively adored. Her and Del Marie in the kitchen are quite a sight to see. And when Barbara comes here, she loves to visit with Barb and Cheryl and Della. And her and Del Marie in the kitchen are two peas in a pod. And the point in all of this is that sometimes we unlearn and we relearn, but it doesn't mean we have to throw away what we've already learned. It doesn't mean that goes away. Everything that I've learned about the saints and about angels from my 100 years of catechism stays with me. That doesn't go away. I can sort through what I believe to be true about any of that and what resonates with my heart. But it doesn't mean I have to throw it all away, because I also have a chanupa, that I also have a hochoka. Having 2 feet means I have 2 feet. One at the hochoka, and the other that says, but angels, by whatever name you call them, are also real. And I learned that over here where this foot walked. This foot walked over here in Catholicism. This foot over here walks the Chanupa way. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So one of the first things that I said to Elise is, you're going to learn about your biology, about your bloodline, about your family history, my love, and that does not mean that anyone else that you love goes away. Our definition of family in this house is different than the definition of family in many other homes. Your Auntie Dell is still your Auntie Dell. Your Auntie Barb is still your Auntie Barb. Your Uncle Don is still your Uncle Don. Your Grandpa Kronk is still your Grandpa. Any of that goes away. It means we get some add-ons. It means it's expanding. Aunt Lily is still Aunt Lily, and Aunt Kelly is still Aunt Kelly, and all of that is still going on. Right? She was so happy that Uncle Cad came to see her when Easton did his second stint at the Children's Hospital last month. She was so happy. And I point that out because sometimes we think we unlearn or we're learning something new and we have to throw away what we already knew or what we were already taught. I think it's oftentimes an opportunity to sort through what we were already taught and allow for the expansion. Bonus family, yeah. Yeah, Gabe, he's just up here in the school, large and in charge. Oh my goodness, look what time it is, everybody. I guess I've missed everyone sitting up here in the school. Oh my goodness. Got some good stuff happening at the school this year. Check it out at schoolofsacredstudies.com. Have some wonderful opportunities for learning. Not all of it is posted yet. Some things are still in the hopper. Heading down to Savannah in March with Todd. To go to Savannah, spend some time there, and go down to Hawkinsville for a bit. Go down to Robins Air Force Base maybe, or at least on the outside of it, and have a look at that King family cemetery that's being dug up. Right? Archaeologists have been digging up the King family cemetery there at Robins Air Force Base for a few years now. Yep, unearthing some things, gonna unlearn and relearn some of that. Thank you to the archaeologists from the university who have been, in a good way, unearthing some things about the King family, about my grandfathers and grandmothers there, as they were, I'm guessing, probably pushed all up into a bunch after the Civil War. And when that land became known as Warner Robins Air Force Base. Exciting times, isn't it? Yeah, it was great to be with you all too. So with that, everybody, get out there and shine. Be open to unlearning, relearning, sorting through, sifting through. You can have 2 feet or 3 feet or 4 feet, right? Be like Grandmother Spider. Be like Tommy and have 8 feet if you want. Be a world citizen. Be a universal citizen. Be a cosmic citizen. Just be you. Get out there and shine. Expand your consciousness. Expand your light. Have a great day, everybody. Blessings be.